welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you've ever watched a world-class athlete, maybe a striker in soccer or a guard in basketball, just pull up mid-sprint.
Oh, it's painful to watch.
It is. That hamstring strain, and you just understand the enormous frustration, the massive cost of these non-contact injuries.
Right.
That one moment, it can just vanish a whole season's worth of hope. And it's what sports medicine spends millions trying to prevent.
Exactly.
So today we are taking the latest cutting-edge technology, machine learning, and putting it to the test against one of the most stubborn problems in this field.
One of the most complex problems, for sure.
Can we reliably predict when those non-contact injuries are going to happen?
That's the million-dollar question. And for this deep dive, we've synthesized the core insights from a highly rigorous systematic review on this exact challenge.
Okay, what are we looking at?
The title is Machine Learning Applications in Non-Contact Lower Limb Sports Injury Prediction, a Systematic Review. The authors are Yuan, Quanwen Zeng, Anjie Wang, Yong Zeng, and Jun Li. And this pretty significant piece of work was published online on March 1st, 2026.
And where can people find it?
In the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, Volume 25, pages 172 through 194.
Great. So our mission today is really drawn right from that review's objective. We're going to synthesize the current evidence on which ML approaches are actually working.
If they're working.
Right. And evaluate their effectiveness, based on real-world performance metrics, and critically examine this idea of interpretability.
Which is so key, because that's what gets these tools out of the research lab and onto the field.
Exactly. Okay, so let's unpack the problem first. Why are non-contact injuries just so inherently hard to predict with, the older methods?
Well, the difficulty really comes down to the nature of the injury itself. These events, think major ACL tears, hamstring strains, they happen without any external impact.
There's no collision.
No collision. So because there's no visible external force, they're entirely linked to this complex web of modifiable intrinsic risk factors.
Okay, what do you mean by intrinsic?
Things like biomechanics, muscle strength imbalances, an athlete's physiology, even their psychological state.
And when you look at certain high-risk sports, these are the majority of problems, aren't they?
The overwhelming majority. The data is, frankly, startling. In elite soccer, for instance, the sources confirm over 90% of all lower limb muscle injuries fall into this non-contact category.
Wow.
And like you said, the stakes are just enormous. The review cites figures from the Australian Football League where the annual financial loss per club,
just from mismatches.
Just from mismatches due to these injuries alone, it can swing between AUD $188,000 to over $333,000.
So this is not just a health problem for the athlete. It's a massive financial issue for the organization.
It's a critical financial strategy issue.
Okay, so if the motivation is that high, you want to save athletes and save hundreds of thousands of dollars, why haven't traditional statistical models, like a simple logistic regression, solved this already?
The fundamental failure of those older models is their linear nature. They are built to see one cause leading directly to one effect.
A causes B.
Right. But injuries don't happen because of one single factor. They emerge from these really complex, non-linear interactions among literally dozens of variables.
You're talking physiological changes, biomechanics.
Biomechanical shifts, psychological stress, environmental fatigue, everything. So a traditional univariate analysis, it's just fragmented. It can only tackle one dimension at a time, and it struggles to map this whole interconnected system.
So machine learning steps in because it can see the nonlinear relationship. It can see the forest and the trees at the same time.
Precisely. ML's core strength here is its capacity to just ingest these high-dimensional, messy, complex data sets and then uncover subtle, latent patterns that conventional stats just can't see.
And there's another hurdle for the old models, right? You mentioned something called class imbalance.
Yes, a massive hurdle. The pronounced class imbalance, that's just typical in all prospective injury data.
Class imbalance is a key term here. For you listening, what does that actually mean in the context of, say, a full athletic season?
It means the outcome we care about, the actual injury, is the extreme minority.
Oh.
You might have thousands of training hours, practice days, or athlete weeks where absolutely nothing happens, and then maybe just one or two actual injury cases.
So the injury is the minority class.
It is, and conventional models are highly incentivized just to guess no injury every single time, because they'll be right 99% of the time.
But they fail to identify the one case that actually matters.
Exactly. the one high-risk case that the whole tool is designed to find.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's dive into the data side of this.
Yeah.
The review looked at 15 pretty rigorous studies, mostly adult athletes in basketball and soccer. The sample sizes were, well, they were all over the place, from just 16 to over 2,100 participants. What kind of inputs are we feeding these ML algorithms?
So the researchers did a great job organizing the predictor variables into 3 major categories.
Okay.
The first, and by far the most common, is demographics and injury history. This was used in a huge 87% of the studies.
And this is the basic stuff, like age, BMI.
Exactly. Age, BMI, competitive level, and critically, previous injury history.
Which makes sense. Intuitively, the best predictor of a future injury is a past injury. But what else?
The second category is physical performance. These are the objective measures. Things like Y balance test scores, various ranges of motion, or ROM, and of course missile strength assessments.
In the third category.
This is where it gets really multidimensional. It's psychological and perceptual variables.
You're talking about things like stress levels.
Perceived stress levels, emotional exhaustion, team cohesion. It was fascinating, actually, to see that 4 studies specifically integrated sleep quality as a key predictor.
Sleep quality, muscle strength, and past injury, all in one model. You can really see why you need machine learning for this kind of complexity.
You do!
Were there any surprising inputs, things you wouldn't normally think of?
Absolutely. Some studies got really innovative. We saw the use of urinary biomarkers, so specific urine proteins, and even detailed match performance indicators.
Like what?
Like offensive win share, specifically in basketball players. It shows the level of granularity researchers are now chasing to try and capture a risk.
So you gather all this complex, high-dimensional data. What algorithms are doing the heavy lifting? Which models did the review find perform the best?
The review identified random forest and, interestingly, traditional logistic regression as the most frequently applied. Both appeared in about 53% of the studies.
But what about performance? Which ones actually worked better?
The overall performance trend was distinct. Tree-based approaches, and this includes random forest, XGBoost, and standard decision trees, they consistently yielded the strongest predictive performance in 6 of the included studies.
Why do you think that is? Why do these tree-based approaches, which kind of map out a series of branching decisions, tend to outperform?
Well, because they inherently handle those complex nonlinear interactions we talked about much better than a linear model like logistic regression.
So it's more like human reasoning.
It is. A decision tree can naturally model things like if BMI is high and hamstring strength is low and sleep quality is poor, then risk is high. It mimics a clinical reasoning pathway much more closely.
And what was the absolute peak performance they found in this body of research?
The single highest performance came from something called a CHADE-based decision tree model.
CHADE?
It stands for Chase Square Automatic Interaction Detector. It's essentially a very clever variation of a standard decision tree. And this model achieved a really impressive area under the curve, or AUC, of 0.91.
Okay, 0.91 is generally considered excellent in classification modeling, right?
Right, it is. It's that threshold for excellent performance.
But an AUC of 0.91 sounds fantastic on its own, but this is where we hit what you call the clinical performance paradox.
Yes.
This is where it gets really interesting for practical application. AUC was the most common metric reported in 14 studies, but the mean AUC across all of them was only 0.73.
A massive performance gap between the best and the average.
And just relying on AUC can be misleading in this context?
Very misleading. Because AUC, it quantifies the model's overall ability to discriminate between injured and non-injured, but it masks performance issues when the data is highly imbalanced.
And we already established just how imbalanced this data is. The risk is small, but the consequence of missing it is huge.
Exactly. The average imbalance ratio, the proportion of injury cases to non-injury cases, was only 0.35. Now, if you think like a sports medicine practitioner, your strategy has to be err on the side of caution.
Right. You prioritize sensitivity. So let's quickly define sensitivity here, because this is the metric that really matters to the clinician on the ground, isn't it?
It's everything. Sensitivity is the model's ability to correctly identify the athletes who will get injured, the true positives.
So if you miss an impending ACL, tear a false negative, that's a catastrophe.
A disaster. But if you flag a healthy athlete as high risk, a false positive, that's just an inconvenience. It just leads to some extra screening. High sensitivity is what makes a model useful.
So we need high sensitivity, but the study found a pretty stark paradox here. What did the numbers actually show?
Among the 6 studies that reported both metrics, the models tended to have much higher specificity.
Which means they were good at identifying the healthy athletes.
Very good. Specificity averaged 0.74. They were great at identifying the non-injury cases, but they had depressingly low sensitivity. The average was only 0.63, and it ranged wildly, dropping as low as 0.35 in some models.
So that's a paradox.
That is the core paradox. It means many of these current ML models are excellent at confirming the health of the 95% of athletes who are fine, but they're relatively poor at reliably detecting the high-risk few.
The very people you built the model for.
The minority class that needs the intervention. If your model misses a third of the actual injuries, it doesn't leave the bench. It's not clinically useful.
Which makes the clinical translation nearly impossible. So what techniques did the researchers try to use to fix this imbalance problem?
The common approach was using resampling methods. The most frequent one was SMOTE, the synthetic minority oversampling technique. SMOTE tries to fix the imbalance by essentially inventing synthetic injury cases based on the existing data from the real injured athletes.
Wait, okay, if you're creating more injury cases to balance the data, why did the review find that SMOTE actually failed to improve performance in several studies? That seems counterintuitive.
It is, and it points to the incredibly complex nature of real injuries. The review suggests that when you generate these synthetic samples, you risk homogenizing the minority class.
What I'm hearing is that SEMFOT is giving us a lot of fake average injuries, which then drowns out the signal of the real weird outlier injuries that actually happen.
That is the perfect way to put it. The real injury events are rare. They're often caused by a unique, highly specific alignment of factors. If you average them out with synthetic data, you risk masking those rare, clinically crucial patterns.
And the model just overfits to the fake data.
It overfits to the generalized synthetic data, but it still can't capture the complexity of the actual low-prevalence events.
That failure leads us directly into the clinical translation hurdle. A team doctor is not going to use a black box.
Never.
It's not enough for a model to be accurate. It has to be trustworthy. Which brings us to interpretability. The review noted this was a major focus, addressed in 87% of the studies.
Yeah, and for good reason. Clinical translation requires the practitioners to understand why an athlete is flagged. We basically categorize models as either white box.
Like a decision tree.
Exactly, where you can easily trace the pathway. If this is true, then that happens. Or you have complex black box models, like XGBoost or neural networks, which often require post hoc explanation techniques.
So things like F8P values.
Right. SHA stands for Shapley Additive Explanations, and it's a method to try and retroactively explain which features contributed most to a prediction.
It sounds like we would much prefer the white box models then.
Yeah.
That inherent transparency builds trust right away.
Ideally, yes.
So when the researchers did these interpretability analyses, what predictors consistently emerged as being most important across different studies?
The analysis clearly highlighted that BMI body mass index was identified as an important predictor in 4 studies.
Okay.
And previous injury history was cited in 3 studies. Then beyond demographics, biomechanical features were consistently flagged as highly relevant.
So range of motion, muscle strength.
Exactly. Muscle strength, neuromuscular control. These are the factors a doctor can actually focus on for an intervention.
That's critical information, but there's another challenge, right? Something about the temporal validity of the predictions.
A major challenge. Many of these models adopted long-term prediction windows. So, trying to predict risk across an entire 30-week season, for example.
And why is a long prediction window a limitation?
Because an athlete's risk status is not static. It fluctuates dynamically, sometimes daily, based on training load, recovery, sleep, fatigue.
So data from the start of the season might be irrelevant by the end.
It may not reflect the immediate pre-injury condition at all. An alert based on a long-term model might come too late, or worse, be totally irrelevant. It diminishes the actionable value.
So the research suggests a pivot toward what kind of model?
A strong pivot towards short-term prediction. Future research needs to focus on periodic screening monthly, maybe even weekly, to update that risk status.
And did any of the studies show that it's working?
One key study demonstrated the potential. It achieved an impressive AUC of 0.81 when predicting injury within a much more actionable 4-week window using workload data. That's the direction we need to go.
We also have to touch on the heterogeneity hurdle. The review noted most models target any lower limb injury. That seems like a statistical shortcut, doesn't it?
It is. It's a way to get enough injury cases for the model to train on, but it absolutely lacks clinical specificity.
Because a catastrophic ACL tear is not the same as a minor ankle sprain.
Not at all. They have distinct mechanisms, different risk factors, and require wildly different interventions. When a model aims for such a broad target, it reduces the ability to give that targeted, precise prevention guidance, which is the whole point.
We need models that can tell us what kind of injury is coming.
That's the goal.
This has been a deeply insightful look. It's clear that machine learning has massive potential here, but it's still bumping up against these real-world clinical demands.
That's the perfect synthesis. ML shows considerable potential, especially with those tree-based models that can balance performance and interpretability.
Right.
But its practical value is entirely constrained by this need to balance accuracy, transparency, and reliability, especially when dealing with the challenge of class imbalance and that absolute necessity of high sensitivity.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We saw that key factors like BMI and previous injury history are consistently cited as important. However, the review also pointed out that the relevance of those predictors varies substantially across different contexts, different populations, and even different phases of the same season.
Therefore, consider this. ML-derived predictors should never, ever be assumed to generalize across different teams or sports or environments unless they are rigorously validated on independent cohorts.
So context isn't just king in sports medicine.
Is the entire rulebook.
An important lesson in data science and in applying these tools to the human element. If you found this discussion as compelling as we did, we highly encourage you to go read the full article by Yuan and the team.
You'll benefit from the maximum detail and see the figures we talked about.
And please remember to follow the channel and turn on your notifications.
That way you won't miss our future deep dives into the science that's shaping our world.